Picture this. A young British aristocrat sits at the same Munich restaurant every single day for 10 months, waiting. She's not waiting for a friend, or a lover, or even a job interview. She's waiting for Adolf Hitler. And when he finally notices her, well, it changed both their lives forever and nearly altered the course of history. This is the shocking true story of Unity Mitford, the British socialite who abandoned everything, her country, her family, her sanity, for the most dangerous man in the world. I'm talking about a relationship so twisted, so bizarre, that it reads like the darkest fiction. But it's not fiction, it's history, and it's more relevant today than you might think. We're going to explore how personal obsession collided with political extremism, how a young woman's desperate need for attention became a tool of Nazi propaganda, and how this disturbing romance reveals the uncomfortable truth about fascism's appeal to the British upper class. You're watching History Deciphered with Nathan Gale. Now let's get started by diving into one of the most unsettling stories of the 20th century. To understand Unity Mitford's obsession with Hitler, we need to understand the world she came from, because this wasn't just one woman's madness. This was a symptom of something much deeper and more disturbing happening in Britain during the 1930s. Born Unity Valkyrie Freeman Mitford on August 8, 1914, she entered a world that was about to be turned upside down. And here's the thing, her middle name wasn't some random choice. It was Valkyrie, named after the Norse mythological figures who decided who lived and died in battle. Her grandfather suggested it, the same grandfather who had written introductions to the work of Houston Stewart Chamberlain, one of Hitler's favourite anti-Semitic authors. Even more bizarre, she was born in Swastika, Ontario. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Unity was the fifth of 7 children in the eccentric Mitford family, one of Britain's most prominent aristocratic houses. These weren't just wealthy people, they were the kind of family that traced their lineage back to the Norman conquest. But here's where it gets wild. This one family produced some of the most politically extreme individuals of their generation. Nancy became a celebrated novelist, Jessica turned communist and fought fascism in Spain, Deborah became a duchess who managed one of England's greatest estates, and Diana left her wealthy husband to marry Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists. Their wedding ceremony was held at Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels' home, with Hitler as the guest of honor. Let that sink in for a moment. The Mitford children were raised in an atmosphere of what one biographer called formality and anarchy. Their parents, David and Sydney Freeman Mitford, believed girls didn't need formal education, so the daughters were largely self-taught, spending their time reading whatever caught their interest in the family library. This isolation from the outside world led them to develop their own private language, strange family games, and a thicket of nicknames that became legendary. But more importantly, it gave them an unshakable confidence and a desperate need to distinguish themselves from one another. When you're competing for attention in a family of 7 brilliant, eccentric children, you've got to do something extreme to stand out. Unity found her calling in 1933 when she attended the Nuremberg rally with her sister Diana as part of a British Union of Fascist delegation. It was there that she first laid eyes on Adolf Hitler, and according to her own diary, which was recently discovered and authenticated by historians, that moment changed everything. She wrote that seeing him turned her conviction into worship. From then on, she had one singular goal: to be as close to Hitler as possible, no matter what it took. But here's what makes this story even more chilling. Unity wasn't some isolated lunatic. She was part of a broader movement within the British aristocracy that was actively sympathetic to Nazi ideology. During the 1930s, significant factions of the British upper class harboured Nazi sympathies and pursued what historians now call an actively pro-German agenda. We're talking about people like Lord Rothermere, owner of the Daily Mail, who wrote editorials titled "Hurrah for the Black Shirts" and personally congratulated Hitler on his invasions. We're talking about members of the royal family who maintained close ties with Nazi Germany. The Duke of Windsor, the former King Edward VIII, visited Hitler in 1937 and was seriously considered by the Nazis as a potential ally who might help facilitate British-German cooperation. This wasn't just a few eccentric individuals. This was a systematic infiltration of fascist ideology into the very heart of the British establishment. Secret organisations supporting Nazi Germany operated openly in London. Dinner parties in Mayfair regularly featured discussions about the merits of authoritarian rule. The complacency and complicity of the English elite nearly allowed authoritarianism to take hold in Britain, just as it had in Germany and Italy. Unity Mitford wasn't an anomaly. She was a symptom of a much larger and more dangerous phenomenon. After that first sighting at Nuremberg, Unity became completely obsessed. In the summer of 1934, she moved to Munich and enrolled in a language school conveniently located near Nazi Party headquarters. But this wasn't about learning German, this was about hunting Hitler. She discovered that he had a routine, he ate lunch every day at the same restaurant, the Osteria Bavaria, so Unity started showing up there too, every single day, sitting as close to his table as possible, trying to catch his attention. For 10 months, she stalked him. 10 months of showing up, day after day, hoping he would notice her. Can you imagine the determination, the obsession, the sheer audacity? She later wrote in her diary that she was willing to do anything, absolutely anything to meet him. And here's where it gets even more calculated than you might think. Unity wasn't just sitting there hoping for the best. She was conducting what amounted to an intelligence operation. She had affairs with several of Hitler's SS adjutants who gave her detailed information about his movements and whereabouts. She used these connections to position herself perfectly in his line of sight, making sure she was impossible to ignore. Finally, on February 9th, 1935, it worked. Hitler invited the persistent English girl to his table. Unity meticulously recorded this moment in her diary, describing it as the most wonderful and beautiful day of my life. I am so happy that I wouldn't mind a bit dying. I suppose I am the luckiest girl in the world. For me, he is the greatest man of all time. And Hitler? He was reportedly smitten by this tall, blonde English aristocrat with the mysterious middle name Valkyrie. What followed was one of the most bizarre relationships in modern history. Between 1935 and 1939, Unity documented 139 meetings with Hitler in her diary. She was given unprecedented access to the Nazi inner circle, attending party rallies, state occasions, and private gatherings. She had a private box at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. She appeared alongside Hitler on the balcony during the announcement of the Anschluss in Vienna in 1938. She was literally standing next to one of the most evil men in history as he announced the annexation of Austria to a cheering crowd. But here's what makes Unity's story particularly chilling. Her diaries reveal that her devotion to Hitler was genuinely religious in nature. She consistently referred to him with capitalized pronouns like he and him, describing him as heavenly, an angel, and terribly sweet. She recorded crying herself to sleep at the thought of being apart from him. This wasn't political admiration, this was worship, pure and simple. She had found her God, and he happened to be a genocidal dictator. Hitler, for his part, seemed to genuinely enjoy Unity's company, but his motivations were more complex than simple affection. He was fascinated by her middle name, Valkyrie, and her family's connections to German culture and figures like Richard Wagner. He publicly praised her as a perfect specimen of Aryan womanhood, but more importantly, he saw her as a symbol of the British upper classes. He fatally assumed that the Mitfords were the movers and shakers in Britain who ran the country's foreign policy. This was a classic case of projection. Hitler, who came from nothing and had fought his way to the top through violence and manipulation, couldn't understand that aristocratic families like the Mitfords, while prominent, didn't actually control British foreign policy. Albert Speer, Hitler's architect and one of his closest confidants, later wrote about Unity's persistent attempts to convince Hitler to make a deal with Britain. Even during periods of intense international tension, she continued to advocate for her home country, apparently believing she could somehow bridge the gap between the two nations. This gives us a glimpse into just how deluded Unity had become. She genuinely believed that her personal relationship with Hitler could influence the course of international relations. But Unity's presence in Hitler's inner circle created tensions, particularly with Eva Braun, Hitler's long-term companion. Hitler reportedly played Unity off against Braun to make her jealous. Braun's diary entries reveal her resentment. She is known as the Valkyrie and looks the part, including her legs. I, the mistress of the greatest man in Germany and the whole world, I sit here waiting while the sun mocks me through the window panes. Can you imagine? Here's Eva Braun, literally Hitler's girlfriend, feeling threatened by a British aristocrat who was thousands of miles from home, living in a fantasy world where she could somehow convert the Führer to peace. Meanwhile, back in Britain, Unity's actions were attracting serious attention from the intelligence services. MI5 officer Guy Liddell noted her close and intimate contact with Hitler and viewed her actions as coming perilously close to high treason. A 1936 report went even further, labeling her more Nazi than the Nazis. British intelligence requested that her passport be impounded. Think about that for a moment. The British government was so concerned about one of their own citizens that they considered stripping her of her right to travel. Unity had become a security threat to her own country, but Unity wasn't content to just worship Hitler in private. She became an active participant in Nazi propaganda. She delivered virulently anti-Semitic speeches at Hitler youth festivals. She was arrested in Prague for distributing Nazi propaganda. She wrote an open letter to Julius Streicher's infamous newspaper Der Stürmer, declaring, "The English have no notion of the Jewish danger. Out with the Jews. Heil Hitler. P.S. Please publish my name in full. I want everyone to know I am a Jew hater." This letter caused public outrage in Britain, even by the standards of the 1930s, when anti-Semitism was unfortunately more common. Unity's explicit hatred was shocking. Here's what's particularly disturbing about Unity's embrace of anti-Semitism. She wasn't just spouting abstract hatred, she was enjoying the practical application of Nazi ideology. She was known to dine regularly with Julius Streicher, one of the most vicious anti-Semites in the Nazi hierarchy, who was famous for forcing Jewish people to eat grass for his entertainment. Unity found this amusing. She laughed at the humiliation and degradation of innocent people. This wasn't political ideology anymore, this was sadism. But there were also moments that revealed the fundamental absurdity of Unity's position. Despite her fanatical devotion to Nazism, she never stopped being fundamentally British. She continued to argue with Hitler about British interests. She provided him with lists of potential supporters and enemies in Britain, apparently believing she was helping to build a bridge between the two countries. In her twisted worldview, she could somehow be simultaneously loyal to both Britain and Nazi Germany. It's a level of cognitive dissonance that's almost impossible to comprehend. As the 1930s wore on and war became increasingly inevitable, Unity found herself in an impossible position. Hitler warned her and her sister Diana at the 1939 Bayreuth Festival that war with Britain was inevitable within weeks, and they should return home. Diana left for England, but Unity chose to remain in Germany. Her family sent desperate pleas for her to come home, but she refused. In her mind, leaving Hitler would be the ultimate betrayal of everything she believed in. And then came September 3rd, 1939. Britain declared war on Germany. For Unity, this wasn't just a political development, it was the end of her world. Everything she had lived for, everything she had built her identity around, was suddenly shattered. The two countries she loved, the two loyalties that defined her, were now enemies. Her sister Deborah later observed that everything Unity lived for was shattered by the outbreak of war between the countries she loved. What happened next reveals just how completely Unity had lost touch with reality. Distraught by Britain's declaration of war, she took a pistol that had been given to her by Hitler himself and shot herself in the head in Munich's English Garden. But even in this final act, Unity couldn't escape the absurdity of her situation. She survived, but with severe brain damage that left her debilitated, with difficulty walking and speaking. Hitler himself visited her in the hospital during the initial weeks of the war. Think about that. The leader of Nazi Germany, in the middle of launching World War II, took time to visit his British admirer who had just tried to kill herself because she couldn't reconcile her divided loyalties. Unity was eventually repatriated to Britain in 1940, returning as an invalid to a country that now viewed her as a traitor. She spent the last 8 years of her life as a shadow of her former self, never fully recovering from the brain damage caused by her suicide attempt. She died in 1948 from meningitis caused by the bullet wound. It was a tragic end to a tragic life, but perhaps it was also fitting. Unity Mitford had literally tried to destroy herself rather than face the reality of what she had become. But here's where Unity's story becomes even more disturbing when you consider the broader context. She wasn't alone in her Nazi sympathies. Her family largely supported her ideology, at least initially. Her father joined both the British Union of Fascists and the Anglo-German Fellowship. Her mother remained sympathetic to fascist ideas throughout the war, even after Unity's suicide attempt and repatriation, even after the full extent of Nazi atrocities became clear. Significant segments of the British upper class remained unrepentant about their earlier flirtations with fascism. Diana Mitford, Unity's sister and Oswald Mosley's wife, never renounced her fascist beliefs. As late as 1989, she was still denying the Holocaust and expressing admiration for Hitler. This wasn't just youthful indiscretion or political naivety. This was a deep-seated ideological commitment that survived even the revelation of genocide. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the appeal of authoritarianism to certain segments of society, even in supposedly democratic countries. The story of Unity Mitford and her aristocratic cohort reveals something profoundly disturbing about the fragility of democratic norms. It shows us how easily educated, privileged people can be seduced by authoritarian ideology, especially when it promises to preserve their status and power. The British aristocrats who supported Hitler weren't ignorant peasants manipulated by propaganda. They were some of the most educated and influential people in the country. They had access to information, they had international connections, they understood the implications of their choices, and yet they chose fascism anyway. This has profound implications for our understanding of how democracy dies. It's not always through external invasion or violent revolution. Sometimes it dies from within, through the complicity of the very people who are supposed to defend it. When those in positions of power and influence decide that authoritarianism is preferable to democracy, when they prioritize their own interests over the common good, when they convince themselves that extremism is just politics by other means, that's when democratic societies are most vulnerable. Unity Mitford's story also reveals the seductive power of charismatic leaders and the dangers of uncritical devotion. Her relationship with Hitler wasn't really about politics or ideology, it was about psychological need. She was a young woman from a large family desperately seeking individual attention and validation. Hitler provided that validation, and in return she gave him her complete loyalty. This dynamic, the trade of attention for devotion, is something we see repeated throughout history and in our own time. Authoritarian leaders understand that many people are willing to surrender their critical thinking, their moral compass, even their self-interest, in exchange for the feeling of belonging to something greater than themselves. The parallels to our current moment are impossible to ignore. We live in an era of rising authoritarianism, of political polarization, of people choosing ideology over democracy. We see individuals and groups willing to abandon long-held principles, to embrace extremism, to attack democratic institutions, all in service of leaders who promise them purpose and belonging. Unity. Mitford's story serves as a warning about how personal psychological needs can be weaponized by dangerous leaders and how quickly civilized societies can slide toward barbarism. But perhaps most importantly, Unity's story forces us to ask difficult questions about how we form our beliefs and whom we choose to idolize. Her obsession with Hitler began as a form of rebellion, a way to shock her family and gain attention. But it metastasized into something much darker, something that consumed her entire identity and ultimately destroyed her life. It reminds us that the line between provocative nonconformity and dangerous extremism is thinner than we might like to believe. The tragedy of Unity Mitford isn't just that she wasted her life on a monster, it's that she represents a broader failure of moral imagination among her class and generation. She and her aristocratic peers had every advantage, every opportunity to understand the true nature of fascism and to resist it. Instead, they chose complicity, they chose collaboration, they chose to prioritize their own comfort over the survival of democratic civilization. And that choice, multiplied across thousands of influential individuals, nearly allowed one of history's greatest evils to triumph. Unity. Mitford died in 1948, but her legacy lives on as a cautionary tale about the seductive power of extremism and the fragility of democratic values. Her story reminds us that democracy is not self-sustaining, that it requires active defense by people of conscience, and that the greatest threats to freedom often come not from obvious enemies, but from those who should be its greatest defenders. In our own turbulent times, when democracy faces new challenges and authoritarian movements gain strength around the world, the lesson of Unity Mitford has never been more relevant. We ignore it at our peril,